Let's go to Genesis chapter 4, and I am going to read from verse 17 all the way to 5:32. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. And Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the father of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, "Hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord." This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. And he blessed them and named them men when they were created. When Adam lived 130 years, he fathered a son on his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered the son, and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from all work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Phew. We made it, right? We made it together. Well, why do we skip or simply skim read genealogies in the Bible? Because we are postmodern Westerners. That's why. For us, it doesn't matter much. Honestly, if you ask me, I will have a hard time to tell you the names of my great-grandparents. I've never met my grandfathers in life. I'm the son of older parents. So sometimes I don't remember. I know that one was Joseph, but I don't recall the name of the other grandfather. Never met him. I met my grandmothers. So we have this disregard for our ancestors, for our genealogical tree. Why? Because this is the way our culture works. For ancient Israelites, this is the way they saw themselves as a person. The way that they considered themselves to be someone in history was by going back and seeing and actually knowing about their roots. In the book of Genesis, in a specific way, genealogies work as a literary resource for Moses. If you see, Moses summarizes the genealogy of Cain, and he expands the genealogy of Seth. And he does that a few other times. For example, we have the genealogy of Ishmael summarized and then expanded the genealogy and the story of Isaac. We have Esau's line summarized, and then we have an expanded account and actually the expanded life of Jacob in the book of Genesis. So Moses always summarizes first the non-elect seed, and then he expands the elect seed, the line of the chosen line is always expanded. Another thing is, if you notice, genealogies also work as bookmarks. When they wrote when Moses was writing, it was hard to say, for example, chapter 1, chapter 2, like we have today in our books. And why do we do divisions in chapters? Because the subject in that chapter ends, and then we start a new chapter. And then there's another subject or another part of the story. For Moses, they didn't have this chapter idea, so they had to have bookmarks. And the bookmarks for Moses in the book of Genesis were the genealogies. As you see, the chapter 5 starts with an expression that is, this is the book of the generations of Adam. This is a way to start a new chapter. Therefore, and this happens again in chapter 2, if you see verse 4, Moses says, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth. So if he starts in chapter 2 a chapter and only starts a different chapter in chapter 5, what we have in chapter 2 to 4 is a unity. Moses wants us to see chapter 2, 3, and 4 as a unity. It's just one part of the story, and then he starts chapter 5. And another thing before we jump into the text is, genealogies for Moses, and they're curious. Let me tell you, for example, they're fast forward. I know the ones from old here, and I don't want to say old people, but the ones from the past generation, we remember that we have the cassettes. And in the cassettes, we have that little button of forward or rewind, and we were listening to a song, and then we wanted to go to the part that we wanted, so we would slightly press the forward button, and we'll go, and it will go to a part that we wanted, right? And then we skipped that part that we don't want, and would go straight to the part we want. This is how the genealogies kind of worked. For example, this genealogy here has a span of 1,500 years in chapter 5. 1,500 years were forwarded for us to get to an important character. Who is that? Noah. We have another 10 people genealogy in the future. And it is, for example, the genealogy of David in the book of Ruth. 10 people, just like we have here, 10 generations. Fast forward all the way to David. We have another genealogy of 10 people in Genesis 11. Fast forward a lot of years and stops in Abraham. And what happens? When it stops in Noah, tells the story of Noah. When it stops in Abraham, tells the story of Abraham. When it stops in David in the book of Ruth, then we have 1st and 2nd Samuel expands the story of David. So genealogies are bookmarks to help us to fast forward years in history and land in important covenantal heads in the history of redemption. All right, with that said, I don't hope to give you appreciation for genealogies from now on, but I need to tell you why they are important, and theologically they are very important. So going forward now, it's our time to go forward. Let's talk about the first part of the genealogy, the seed of the serpent. This says, and if you came here first time or second time, third time, and we are stopping on the genealogy, it's not every Sunday that I preach genealogies, okay? So bear with me. Let's try to take the most of what is here. What's the seed of the serpent? The seed of the serpent is marked by a few characteristics. First, celebration of man's name and seed. Remember, why am I calling the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman? Because this is the language that God uses when he curses the serpent. God says, I will put enmity between your offspring and the offspring of the woman. And he tells the serpent that. So we have this conflict happening between these two offsprings. And here we have a description of the seed of the serpent, marked by the seed of Cain. What's the mark of that? Well, celebration of man's name and seed development. See there, Cain knew his wife. Knew, I repeat, is an euphemism for had intimacy with his wife. He met his wife intimately, and they had a child. But who is Mrs. Cain? Who is Mrs. Cain? Well, there's only one option here. Mrs. Cain, Cain's wife, is his sister. It's a pastor. His sister? What else? We don't believe in the wrong theory that says that God created a separate person straight. God directly created a wife for Cain. No, that's his sister. And by the way, it's important to understand that ethics is created by God. All ethics is created by God and implanted in the hearts of men. For example, there was no law for murdering before Cain murdered Abel. Nevertheless, that is a natural law because all human beings were created in the image and likeness of God. So an attempt against the life of a human being is an attempt against God himself. That's why that law was implanted in their hearts. Why adultery was not forbid before the law, but we see, for example, man having the author showing clearly that Lamech here was a polygamist. And that is not a good example. So why? Because there was no law against adultery. Well, but it's implanted in man's heart the reality that God created male and female and united them and said, you man, you will unite with one woman. So there's this natural order of creation that is implanted in man, bearing witness that adultery, having a different wife other than your own wife, is a bad thing. Okay, but there was no law at this point against intermarriage in family. Is this a problem? Well, God knew that was the only way that the humanity would multiply. There was no other option. So here Cain knew his sister. He married his sister. They conceived and they bore Enoch. And I want to make sure that you see that the first thing that wanderer Cain did was to build a city. Build a city, and what did he do? He put the name of his son to the city, exalting his son's name. It's interesting that Cain clearly has no regards for the name of the Lord. He has regard for the name of his posterity. He wants to make his son's name remain. And then Enoch bores others, and then we stop in Lamech. Who is Lamech? Well, Lamech is a vengeful, violent man who, for the first time, marries two wives. And the fact that Lamech is the first polygamist tells a lot about polygamy in this time in history. If Lamech is the father of polygamous men, polygamous people, that's not a good thing to follow, because Lamech is clearly shown as a bad example. Well, he married two wives, Ada and Zillah, marking two things. First, this generation is concerned with men's name, glorifying men's name, and establishing big cities. Second, there's an emphasis in the seed of the serpent in cultural development. Please notice with me that Lamech had three sons. He had also a sister that is there in a strange way. And the name Naamah means something about like she was beautiful. She was good looking, and maybe has to do with her quality. But let's focus on the three kids. We have Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal-Cain. Do you see what they created? First, we have Jabal. He is the father of all those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So first time in history that we have people establishing in places, building their houses, tents, and creating livestock, having livestock, herding, was here, Jabal. We are not sure if they were using for food. We have that for sure after the flood. The flood changed a lot. But they were using their cattle for something. Not only sheep, because Abel was a shepherd of sheep, but clearly here, the first one to develop this technique of establishing in a house and having livestock was Jubal, the seed of the serpent. We have the second one, Jubal was the father of all the musicians. Can you see that? So how did music start? Well, music started with the seed of the serpent. Is that a good thing about music? No, we love music. We love music. But we need to highlight this fact. The first one to play music, the inventor of music, was part of the seed of the serpent. Okay? And I can't speak because before being a pastor, I was a musician. I'm fine saying that. But lastly, we have Tubal-Cain, who was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, probably weapons. knives, swords. He was probably a warrior. So you have this cultural development being part of the seed of the serpent. We have those who are not in the elected line being equipped to develop culture, to build cities, and to live in tents. Well, what do we take from that common grace? So when we see this happening, even today, in this evil generation we're in, and we admire beautiful songs written by people who are clearly not committed to the Lord, non-Christians, and we ask ourselves, why is this music so good? Why is this technology developed so well? Why this city is so remarkable? They are not Christians. They do not have any commitment with the Lord. What do we think? What is our conclusion? It's God, His common grace, equipping even those who are not of the seed, those who are the seed of the serpent, even the sons of the devil, like Cain is described here in Scripture, to provide for humanity. Is this a sin to listen to? So is this a sin to do music? Well, ultimately, music started with the seed of the serpent. Of course not. If you see beauty in the world, if you listen to a melody and it's a beautiful melody, it comes from God. There's no other way. God is the owner of all beauty. God is the one who, from Him comes all good gift. All good things come from God. Is this that they are being seen as smarter than the seed of the woman because they are away from God? No, because even this quality that they have to develop culture, city, and establish cities, they come from God. But this is remarkable about the seed of the serpent. But also the seed of the serpent is marked by revenge and death. Here we have the evil Lamech. Lamech, not only polygamous, he was violent. He clearly didn't want to have any dependence of the Lord. He murdered someone. The text can mean that he was able to murder. He was willing to murder, but not murdered yet. We can read two ways. And let me explain one thing to you. This is Hebrew poetry, okay? It's not that he killed two people. See the parallelism. Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. Do you see the parallelism? He's saying the same thing in two different ways. And then he says, I have killed the man for wounding me, and then says the same thing in a different way. A young man for striking me. It's the same thing. It's not that he killed a man and a young man. This man is that young man. And that young man only struck him. He was willing to, or even killed that man simply because he was struck by that man. I want to highlight a few things. First, remember that God told Cain that anyone who touches you will be revenged sevenfold. Cain's revenge was sevenfold, and then Cain's revenge was from God. God was telling Cain that he would revenge Cain. But here we have Lamech, 11 times more than Cain, and playing his revenge by himself, believing in his own strength and strategies to revenge himself. So you see a decline of fear of God in this generation of the serpent. And it has happened this way all the way until today. And it will be so until the day that Jesus comes. That's why the world goes worse and worse? Why are we facing challenges today that in the past were not a thing? Why are we discussing, for example, how to use the pronouns? That was not something for you from the 60s, right? If you're from the 60s, maybe your father, if you could talk to your father today that is not here, and you could communicate with him saying, well, now we are in 2025 discussing with a huge problem. I don't know, I'm never sure if I call a person a he or a she, and that can put me in jail. Maybe your grandfather would say, what? You're lying to me. I can't believe it. Because it goes worse and worse and worse. The way is just downward. Why? This is the seed of the serpent. It goes downward. It gets better. Okay, but let's go to the seed of the woman. Because now we have this seed of the serpent summarized, and we have a seed of the woman coming with a new hope. There's a new hope clearly in the text. See, Adam knew his wife again. And there's this language of resurrection. Abel died, was killed, and now Adam knew his wife again, and he bore Seth. And the name Seth is a playing with words, meaning appointed one, the appointed one. Remember, Cain was the one that was acquired. I acquired it. Abel means insignificant, vapor. But now we have the appointed one, Seth, to bear the seed of the woman. And why? Because Cain killed him. Seth was born. Both give name to him. The appointed by the Lord shows faith. And I repeat, I believe Adam and Eve had saving faith. It is clear here that they still believe that something will happen, that the Lord will change their circumstance. They still have hope in this Messiah, this promised line, this promised offspring that would come. Maybe is Seth that one? Maybe that's the son that we are waiting for. God appointed for me another offspring. And maybe he's the one to take to destroy the works of the serpent. And then we have a new beginning. And from here, I would not go verse by verse. It will be impossible. From here, I would just stop in what I believe is Moses' intention to highlight. First, there's a new beginning. I don't know if you noticed that, but the beginning of chapter 5 is a clear new Genesis. Do you see that? There's a clear language here, starting everything afresh. When God created man, he created him in the likeness of God. We know this language from before, right? It was said before. It is almost like Moses is writing this as a new Genesis. There's a new line coming. There's a new descendant. He created him male and female in this new beginning. This is clear again. And how did he call them? He called male and female men. And this is very important to stop right here. First, brothers and sisters, let's highlight this once again. It is a better moment to speak this in the pulpit in America. A couple of years ago, that was not so easy. But I was speaking anyway. God created male and female, and that's all that is. Male and female. And that's all. There's nothing in between, nor before or after. There's only male and female. And anything that goes beyond that is a perversion of God's creation. Am I saying that we are to hate and not show love? No, that's not what I'm saying. who are to love and in love speak the truth. If you see someone identify with something that is outside of male and female, the best thing, the most loving thing to do for that person is to tell the person the truth in Scripture in love for the sake of their own soul. And another thing about that is, God decided to call male and female, humanity, men, and the word here for men is Adam. He decided to call humanity, in a general sense, men. So if we are to speak in general, the best way as Christians, biblically, to write something is use male pronouns to speak about male and female in general. Why? Because this is the biblical way. This is the way that God used. It is clear here that God created male and female, created them, and He blessed them, and He named them they. Is that what you see? No, God didn't call them they. So we don't call them they. We call them men. And we face the consequences for doing this. Is it easy? No, not today. We'll keep doing it. We're not called to live an easy life. We're called to proclaim what is truth. We stand for truth. And God created them. And here we have a long line that goes from creation to new creation. First, let me highlight one thing. Adam fathered his son in his own likeness, after his image, named him Seth. What does this mean? Is here that God stopped giving men his image and likeness? No, that's not it. But what is clear here, and I want to highlight two things. First, Adam is declared here to be the federal agent for all humanity. Adam was creating his kids were being created by God, but through him. So we have just one single couple that we all came from. We all came from Adam and Eve. In this sense, there's only one race in the world. There's only one race in the world. What is that race? The human race, mankind, coming from Adam and Eve, and no one else. It's, of course, you have differences, and there's so much that happened from Adam and Eve to today, but we are all descendants of one couple. We're all one race, one family, and we are all descendants of Adam and Eve. Here is also showing that not only Adam is a federal agent of all humanity, but also that we inherit his genetics. We inherit his sin. That's why when we listen to Dear Baby Rose there, we love her and she's the cutest human being in the world, but she's a little sinner. And I can't say that because I know Joe and Kayla agree. She's a little sinner. She needs grace because she was conceived in sin. She was born with a sinful nature. And unless she repents when she's coming to the age of reason, there's no salvation for her. Because although we know that our little beautiful newborn, they are beautiful and they're lovely, they're not innocent, because none of us, because we are all created in Adam's image and likeness. Of course, we inherit his image and his sin, his nature, but we are still in the image and likeness of God, because Adam bears the image and likeness of God. Well, from here, we have a long line. We have Jared, and we have this long ages. They're always difficult to understand. And I read a lot. There are some explanations for those long ages. 900 something, 800 and something. Why is that? Well, scientifically, they claim two main theories. One, it is the life after flood. Sorry, before the flood. Lifespan started to decrease after the flood, and that's true. So maybe the new environment, maybe the new air, whatever. But the most convincing theory for me is genetics, mutations. And after mutation, lifespan started to decrease because human beings started to be more fragile. But let's move on because there's one highlight here. The first highlight comes in Enoch. I don't know if you're seeing Enoch walked with God. And what is this? That's not only walking, but living a pious life. Enoch is maybe the most godly man in the whole Old Testament. Enoch. So much. And I want you to see this hope. Enoch did not see death. So we're talking here of the wages of sin of Adam and Eve being death. And although we know that Adam lived 930 years, so God's gracious sentence of death was only accomplished 930 years after his sin. Here we have, he died. And there's a man here, and because he walked with God, he didn't die. Lived a godly life and was a pious man, and he didn't die. We read in Jude that Enoch was not only a pious, passive man, but he was an active preacher of the gospel. If you read Jude, verses 11 to 14, you will read that Enoch was a prophet, and he was preaching against that evil generation. What evil generation? Probably the generation of Cain. He was preaching, and he was so godly, so bold, that God took him, and Noah didn't see death. And if you talked with me a few years ago, I would say, well, somehow Enoch saw death, because there's no way to go to heaven without seeing death. But today, I am convinced that actually Enoch never died. Right? We talked about that. I am convinced that Enoch never saw death and went straight to heaven, because this is the hope, and this is what happens here. Somehow that life shouldn't be interrupted by death, because this is the result of sin, and somehow Enoch walked so much with God, although he was a sinner, that he didn't see death. Another highlight here for Methuselah. The longest life on earth. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't know why. And I was not an easy kid. I mentioned to you already. I was a really rough kid. And I remember when we wanted to call someone really old, we would call the person Methuselah. And I never understood why until I read Genesis for the first time. I said, oh, that's why. And I was like bullying people using a biblical name. It was terrible. I was forgiven. I don't do that anymore. But it's clear here that Lamech's son, the son of the most godly man in this lineage at least, was the one who lived the longest life. And then, it's interesting. And then you read Jesus saying, if you honor father and mother, your days will be long on earth. And here you have Lamech's son of a godly man, start right. He had the longest life on earth. Lamech lived, and then he fathered, after Lamech, he fathered a son. And then we have another Lamech, the son of Methuselah. And then we have Noah being described as in a prophetic way. Noah is seen in a prophetic way. The name Noah is a plain word also with the name Nuach, that is rest, comfort. And then what Lamech says, Noah's father says, is, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, does it bring you to anything that happened before? See here, Lamech is going back to the curse, to the ground God gave to Adam. Somehow here, there is a knowledge of the curse of the ground and an explanation why it was so hard to work the ground. And Lamech was experiencing that hard labor of the ground. He was suffering. His family was suffering. His brothers and sisters were suffering and working in the way that God had said so. Remember, God said, cursed is the ground because of you to Adam. In pain you shall eat. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth to you. That was the promise. Here we have a man saying, this son will transform everything. Noah, rest, is the one who will come to give us relief from this curse. So let's try to be theological here. It's very important. Lamech was waiting for a rescuer from the curse. Lamech was waiting for that seed. Can you see that the hope that Messiah would come comes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in this lineage, in this genealogy, and is the hope that is held all the way until Jesus, the right Messiah, the true Messiah, comes. Lamech says, maybe this is the one who will give us rest. Maybe this is the one who will reverse the curse. And that's why I titled this section, From Creation to New Creation. Because honestly, Lamech is waiting for a new creation. Is waiting for a new heaven and new earth. He's waiting for the one who would come and would stop this curse that we are living, stop this hard labor and cursed ground that we are trying to work, and would give us final rest. He was hoping for heaven. He was hoping that Noah would be the one who would reverse the work of the serpent. That was not so. Lamech, we know, is wrong. But now let me end this, just giving an analysis of the two offsprings. Let's compare by contrast the two offsprings. I have an image here. I hope you can see well. I don't think the names are clear. I'm sorry. But there are seven generations for the Canaanites. If we count from Adam, it is 8. But if we count from Cain, 7, all the way to the branched Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal Cain. The Sethites, if we count from Seth and not from Adam, we have 10, all the way to 3 kids as well. Can you see the comparison? There's 3 kids here, and there's 3 kids at the end of the genealogy. We also have a few matching names. For example, we have an Enoch here, and we have an Enoch here. Can you see that? We have a Lamech here, and we also have a Lamech here. And these names are interesting. See, the Canaanite Enoch is a man who has his name lifted up. The Sethite Enoch is a man who lifts up the name of the Lord so high and walks with the Lord so closely, he doesn't see death. We have the evil Lamech in the Canaanite generation. Evil, violent, murder Lamech, polygamous Lamech. And then we have the other side. The Lamech on the other side is a godly man, a hard worker, who has a kid and expect that that kid will reverse the curse to the serpent, to the men. Let me show the contrast here. Generation of Cain, calling upon the name of men. Enoch, my son, is the name of the city. Then we have a generation that calls upon the name of the Lord. And what is that? It's both calling upon the name of the Lord for help, crying out the name of the Lord, and proclaiming the name of the Lord. The verb here can be used in both ways. Either way. Another contrast. The generation of Cain is a specialist in the earthly glories. They build cities. They're culturally savvy. They are musicians. They are engineers. They dwell in tents. They have livestock. They are the ones building the biggest cities and the most developed societies. Whereas the generation of Seth is marked by the simplicity of a godly life. The simplicity of a man who walks with God. The generation of Cain is marked by the cessation of life. Not only Lamech is a murderer, but you don't hear anything else about the generation of Cain. Probably the way it declined, that gives the reason for, in chapter 6, the evil in the world multiplied so much that God had to bring the flood. That's the generation of Cain. But what's the generation of Adam marked for? Continuation of life and hope of a new life. What do we have? We have, isn't it not remarkable to you that the generation of Cain has no age marked, but the generation of Seth is marked by long lifespans? And the numbers are there. The math is clear. He lived all the way until here. He fathered, and then after that, he lived more years. And then you have X plus Y, and then it gives a full lifespan. It's clear that the author wants to highlight the continuation of life and lifespan, God's mercy on that. Well, my question is, who are we? Are we from the generation of Cain or from the generation of Seth? Because this is the question. I would come here and preach this genealogy, and if I don't apply it to you, it didn't do anything. You would leave here with a lot of knowledge about sons and names and ages and everything. How about me with that? And I just want to ask you a question. What line are we? Because we tend to think that because we're Christians, we are from the generation of Seth. And somehow, by God's grace, we are. Because with the flood, only Seth's generation lived. We are. But even after the generation of Cain died, we have an evil generation coming from Noah. Because from the three kids, we have Ham, who was clearly seed of the serpent. Shem is the chosen generation. So who are we? Who are you, my brother? Where do you fit in? Generation of Shem or Ham? Generation of Seth or Cain? Are you the generation of Isaac or Ishmael? Are you the generation of Jacob or Esau? And it's not about ethnicity. And I want to claim this because it has always been by faith. Jesus himself calls out his opponents who were Israelites, and he calls them, you remember that, you brood of vipers. What is Jesus referring to? Do you think it's random that Jesus is calling them brood of vipers? Jesus could call them brood of anything else. Brood of vipers means you You are Israelites by birth, but you are the seed of the serpent. You are vipers. Jesus says, you are of your father, the devil, who is a liar, the father of lies, referring to the lie in the garden. But also he says, who was a murderer from the beginning. Who was the first murderer? Cain. Satan was acting in Cain. So Jesus is, in other words, calling them, you are the seed of Cain. So who are we? Where are we? Well, if we have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, we are God's line. We are the generation of Seth. We are from the generation of Jacob. We are from the generation of Isaac and Jacob. Paul says that those of faith are sons of Abraham. Not only by blood, but by faith. Jesus says, all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Paul says that he predestined us for adoption to himself as sons, according to the purpose of his will. Paul even says, you are no longer a slave, you are a son, and you're heir through God. So let me finish this by saying it's possible that ethnically a person can claim to be the seed of Seth, the seed of Shem, the seed of Abraham, but still be from the seed of the serpent. And it's possible for us, Gentiles, by birth, to be called the seed of the woman. What do we need? We need to put faith in Jesus Christ, our Lord. By faith, my brother and my sister, we are the seed of the woman. We are sons of God, children of the Most High. We who are in Christ, we are his heirs. And I want to end with this. For it was fitting that he, from whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. So yes, we are suffering here, just like Enoch suffered by preaching the gospel to an evil generation. But we remember that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. If you have faith in Jesus, you are the seed of the woman and not the seed of the serpent. Stop in thinking otherwise. Do you believe in Jesus for your salvation? Welcome to the family. Let me pray.